into something else.
Yeah, that's leading into this as well. In the Sports Business Journal, John Elrond and his newsletter. This is what I'm just, again, this is from the newsletter. The Pac-12, to reach the $300 million per year mark to basically match the deal with the Big 12, received from ESPN and Fox Sports. This is according to his report in column, the most likely platform to pay that at this point would be Apple, as they reported last month. To be clear, we're not saying that's happening. But Apple is the company that could potentially reach that number, and adding Pac-12 rights does fit what Apple seemingly is trying to do in sports, but it figures to be an all-Apple deal. There was even a suggestion here that that could be all of what they do, that everything is underneath the streaming window and an umbrella, which I've always thought that there would be a linear TV network, and there most likely, I would think, in the end, perhaps there is. But one of the things that they're dealing with right now is that there's a value. What is the value? Apple is like, they're just not going to throw money out, even if they have all the money you would ever want. ESPN's about to go through cutbacks, and so you wonder, with that being the case, are they in any rush to sign any kind of deal when it comes to something else in sports, even though they have content or programming they need to fill? So that's from the Sports Business Journal, and of course, we'll see what happens, what that means with anything, if anything else comes out this week with the Pac-12, their media rights deals, linear and or streaming.
Yeah, I mean, he got Alron got a bit more into it, and he never guaranteed anything. Like you said, he said, to be clear, we're not saying anything is happening, but Apple is the company that could potentially reach that $300 million number. He alludes to them possibly looking back towards, the ESPN ABC tree, but apparently that deal that was originally on the table, $31 million per team. Does that sound like a familiar figure?
Yep.
Apparently, according to him, that's no longer available. So if they were, according to him, to return to ESPN, the thought is that they probably would not be able to get that figure back. So you'd be looking at less money there, just putting two and two together. Apple TV is still in the process of kind of trying to figure out what they're doing total. I mean, they spent a bunch of money on MLS. And there is a spot there, as he points out, but he acknowledges he doesn't know where they stand as far as that goes. So they could be having great conversations with Apple for all we know, and they could be announcing some deal. But the part of it, too, is that he mentions that the streaming piece. And if you listen to, Arizona's, was that the athletic director?
President.
That was the president,
President
right.
Robbins.
The president last week, I mean, he basically guaranteed, while also talking out of both sides of his mouth on a couple things, but that was taken, as we know, a certain type of way, and that was what I was talking about with, it all depends on who you ask about any given comment, because the Big 12 folks will say, he left the door open. The Pac-12 folks will start calling you weird buzzwords and tell you that there's no chance in hell, even though the door was left crack open. It absolutely was. I don't care if you say it'll never happen. That was not a this will never happen statement from him, even though it was 99% in that direction. But yeah, there was the PR return volley last week from the Pac-12. I think that was very clearly seen. You saw everybody suddenly puffing their chest out and coming out with public statements. And I know they kind of did that along the way, but this was clearly an effort that was being made collectively to put the Pac-12's message out there. So the ball's in their court, man. You've said all you've said about what the Big 12 did, and Brett Yormark's the boogeyman, and all this other stuff. This deal's on nobody but the Pac-12 at this point. So, I'm really still just very curious to see what that looks like. I still feel the same way as all along, that everything's going to pretty much stay the way that it is. But, yeah, at this point, it's not about what Dennis Dodd reported or what little seed was planted. This is all on you. Y'all returned the volley last week. John Canzano, in his column, put out there that Tuesday, tomorrow, could very well be a big day. He pointed to the CEOs are all meeting once again, and it'll be the last time they meet for a few more weeks. He even indicated or hinted, while all under the guise of opinion, of course, that this could possibly be possibly a situation where you hear the expansion side of things first, as far as whether they're adding SMU and San Diego State, and that could precede the TV announcement. But he said Tuesday would be a day to possibly look at. So that's tomorrow. Marchand said what he said today, but also acknowledged that he doesn't really know for sure. So tomorrow should be a very interesting day because those CEOs will meet, and maybe they come out of there ready to announce that the Aztecs and Mustangs are joining up and that they're going all three-way deal with Apple, Amazon, and ESPN, or perhaps they don't. I don't know, but I'm very much looking forward to whatever comes out of that meeting and the next step that this takes. Again, I think Marchand's column kind of depends on how you look at it, but the thing that was interesting to me was that there were such matter-of-fact comments last week about the number's going to be better than the Big 12, and it won't be majority streaming, and he's kind of conflicting with that. So something will give, and it'll be fascinating to see what that ends up being.
Steve, to me on an email, Arand's article, Marchand Arand in the New York Post, that's Marchand, doesn't bode well, in my opinion, for the Pac. I started being skeptical when the Pac missed the exclusive window. Yormark got the Big 12 deal done. Of course, that was back in the fall. This has gone on far too long for anything good to come out of it. That's not what the narrative we heard, or at least some of the arguments and discussion from a week ago. I don't know what this means in the end.
And if it's an all or nothing Apple thing, because that's what Apple, has the opportunity to do here. They have, you can say, well, that's not what they have with Major League Baseball. Well, that's not what was made available to them.
Right.
What was made available to them with Major League Baseball was what baseball had available. And look, based on what's going on with the RSNs, Apple could sit around and go like, we could certainly do more because they know where that is. And Friday Night Baseball did really, really well for them. But I wonder, all or nothing, if that's what Apple wants, then that's what Apple's going to get. And Apple can wait. One of the notes on that column is that Apple works on their own time.
You see this watch?
Yeah.
This is
that's
a
what I was
nice
saying
watch,
last week, too.
But they have their own watch, and it's on their time.
They can do whatever they want. So if they're they've got a lot of other things, irons in the fire. So they're not beholden to the Pac-12 at all.
Right. And that's what I was saying last week, though, about the panic button, Paul. I was like, why are Twitter users creating a panic to get a deal done when they can simply wait it out? And, that was referred to by the Arizona president of I would prefer, he said in so many words, I would have preferred if we had waited, but I understand that there's this pressure and there's this feeling of wanting to get done and all of that. But yeah, in theory, they could be more patient with it. And I don't really understand, even if Dennis Dodd's writing an article or John Auerand's writing an article or whoever it may be that you feels, wronging you or is, coming at it from a perspective that's not what you view it as. That doesn't mean that you have to, go to the table to prove them wrong. So if you don't feel like you should be at the table right now, then I guess that they could be more patient. But you pointed out Auerand and his buddy Marchand, also said that it doesn't appear that that they're all that close at the moment. So maybe this is more of a longer waiting game than expected. But, like we have, we've seen, oftentimes if it's not from Canzano or Wilner, then it's not truthful. So, Canzano pointed to Tuesday as a big day to keep an eye on. So Tuesday's tomorrow, and the CEOs are apparently meeting, and I haven't seen much from his activity today. So I don't know what that means one way or the other, but tomorrow will be interesting just to get a better idea of kind of where we are as far as the timeline goes.
What you're saying is there are certain people, no different than what you see in Congress with red states and blue states, that depended on who writes the article, that means it's true.
Right.
And that's unfortunate because I think most everybody is trying to do their job. I do want to thank John Canzano for using some of our audio from our show last week when we were discussing the values of certain cities in the footprint of the Big 12 compared to the values and the footprints of the Pac-12. And we were, I guess, scolded because we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to the value that if SMU is added to the Pac-12, that brings in the Dallas market because the TV networks or whoever are looking at where you are in SMU in the city of Dallas.
Yeah, that seemed like very cherry-picked, I felt like, because he's not looking at it from the same way we're looking at it. He's right in that the Pac-12 is viewing this as a Dallas thing, and they get Dallas. And they're not worried about the fact that SMU doesn't bring ratings in Dallas, although I've seen a lot of charts that have ratings attached to them. So those suddenly don't matter, but they do. That's another thing that matters but doesn't that I'm very confused by, but it doesn't whatever. It all come out in the wash. But I don't think that we were looking at it the same way he was viewing it. He was viewing it a very specific way. Most of the comments were Paul's comments. We're in Texas. We're looking at it from the SMU has not mattered here at all in 30 years viewpoint. Now, if you want to get into, well, that doesn't mean that they can't bring some. Yeah, of course. Like if you're talking about it from the standpoint of grabbing territory and Dallas, business and growing your operations and all that, yes, that absolutely makes sense. But we weren't talking about it from that standpoint. We were talking about it from a pure interest level. That's why ratings was brought up, and that's why when we talk about SMU, they've had some really great moments. We've had Coach Lashley on the show here recently. Like they're good people. Sonny Dykes did a great job there. You obviously knew Chad Morris when he was there. Tanner Mordecai, we covered him. He was the quarterback there. We gave SMU a lot of love. But we're also in Texas, and we know that like they're not viewed that way. Now, could they be if they got a Pac-12 membership? Absolutely. That's why they were brought up in the Big 12 talks. That's why they're being brought up right now. But he was looking at it from a different viewpoint, I feel like, and so I thought that was a little bit of cherry picking, but it doesn't matter. We'll see tomorrow as far as what the CEO's meeting brings, but certainly today is just another little wrinkle in the overall saga that I know a lot of people just want to be over at this point. And that's why I was kind of disappointed when I read what I read today. It's like, oh, you mean it's not ending tomorrow? Like we're not almost at the end?
And again,
we'll see.
One of the reasons I just made that comment that I made about Robbins and SMU, like, look, we're going to continue to give love to SMU. I do, like, part of me does wish they had been in the Big 12 ads just because it's kind of a cool place that most people don't know about, but that's the problem is most people don't really know that much about it because of what happened to them in 1984.
Right. That killed them until about 10 years ago.
So exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot going on there, but ultimately there are, like he said a couple things there. SMU would be great because it gets you to Dallas and that helps you academics, all that. Like
NIL.
Nothing he said about SMU was false, except he had another thing is our goal is, much like Los Angeles is for a lot of our students, is that, and California is for a lot of our students, we want Texas to be...
You're talking about President Robbins.
President Robbins said, we want Texas to be one of those places where we get a lot of our student body from. Well, if that is the case, if that is really a long-term diamond in your strategy, then SMU gets that done a little bit, but if you really want Texas, then you're going to have to go into the conference that has most of the Texas schools. SMU only gets it done a little bit. So like in the interview that Robbins gave, he said a lot of things, but qualified them. He said a couple.
I think what he was, again, I don't know exactly what he was trying to say. He said it, but I wonder if he was also saying that, listen, we want to stay together. But he also, with a lot of the quotes that he said, based on what I read and following somebody who follows Arizona, that we want to see the numbers. How many times did he say we have to see the numbers just to kind of leave that door open? Everybody can look at however you want to what was said by the presidents of Arizona State and Arizona also.
I think it's fascinating that he can make a comment like that, and then people will argue over whether or not he made that comment, and then decide, oh, well, he didn't really mean that part of it. But all the other stuff that was pro my point of view, he meant that stuff. But that comment that doesn't fit that, well, that was taken out of this. And, like, that's where this whole thing has gotten silly is, like, no, you can absolutely say that, yes, there's a 99.99% chance that nothing changes, but don't pretend like that 0.001 comment was not made. Whether it matters or not, probably not. But that was made, and that does feed into the, well, he did leave it cracked open. The crack might be tiny, but it was a crack. So you can argue over that all you want, but I just felt like with the podcast comments, I think we were looking at it from two different places, and that's all right. So I look forward to his reporting on tomorrow's CEO meeting.
Yeah,